makes sense for Bo Nix and the Broncos offense. All right. Dan Orlovsky, smart football guy, got a lot of respect for Dan, went on ESPN and said this.
Houston Texans, the San Francisco 49ers, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Denver Broncos. If I were one of those four teams, I would be immediately calling. I agree with Lewis. I think he's still a really good player. He's not going to be 2021 Triple Crown winner, but very much so a high-end, at worst, number 2 wide receiver. And then Denver, him and Sean Payton, it's the perfect scheme fit. If one of those four teams, I call.
All right, so listed as one of the 4 teams that is a perfect fit for Cooper Kupp. Cooper, in his statement to Rams fans, said that he is highly motivated, as healthy as ever, and looking forward to playing elite football for years to come. How much sense does it make sense for us here in Denver?
I think it would need to involve a major restructure, Zach. I mean, the guy's due like $20 million next year.
Yep.
And I just can't justify paying Cooper Kupp, who's a good player. He's a good player, but he's missed a lot of football games over the last 3 years. He missed 8 of them in 22. He missed 5 of them in 23. And he missed 6 of them in 2024. Okay? So we're talking about maybe a third of the games the last 3 years he hasn't been able to be on the field for. We get it. It's football. Injuries happen. I'm not blaming Kupp, but it's a durability question for me at this point. The only way I'd be interested is if he takes a significant haircut, pay cut, and I'm not so sure that's something he's going to want to sign up for.
So on that front, so he had that record-breaking 2021, right? When he was just, it's arguably the greatest wide receiver season in NFL history.
And to cap it with a Super Bowl MVP is just poetic.
It's insane. Yeah. Like, honestly, it's the greatest season of all time at the wide receiver position. He's one of 5 Triple Crown winners in the history of the sport, meaning he led the league in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, and then they won a Super Bowl, and he won Super Bowl MVP. It's
a dream season.
It's the stuff of legend, right?
It is.
I'll say this, too. Well, let's get to the money here, then we'll get to some of the production stuff. So after that year in 2021, okay, he signed a 3-year contract extension worth $80 million. Now, he just completed the first season of that contract and is scheduled to have a cap hit of $30 million next season and $27 million in 2026.
Wow, it's even higher than I realized. Even higher than I gave you.
Will, not only does that not make sense for the Broncos, it doesn't make sense for anybody. Anybody, okay? So I can't see one of the 31 teams stepping up and doing a trade for this contract. But I could see someone stepping up, doing a trade, and doing an entirely restructured deal. And that's where I do think it becomes relevant for the Broncos, all right? Because if they're just going to end up cutting him. Like, if he does not agree to a restructured deal somewhere else, the Rams are just going to cut him because you're not going to be able to trade this contract. No one in their right mind would take on this contract with this stage in the game, considering some of the health questions that we have about Cooper Kupp. So,
but he's got a dead cap hit of $22 million. That's not Russell Wilson, but if you're the Rams, is that a cuttable contract?
It will be.
$22 million to just eat for a wide receiver?
It will be, because they're going to save money as well that they're going to be able to spend. I think the number is between $7 and $8 million they'll be able to free up. And I don't think the Rams are going to have a choice here. No one is going to take on this contract. No one. So it's like Kupp and his camp is going to have to agree to a restructure. And if they don't, well, the Rams are just going to cut him.
Well, wouldn't he rather get cut then? Because then he can just pick his own destination, become a free agent?
Probably.
So
probably.
That's what's weird about this game of poker that they're all playing right now. He releases this statement last night where he's pretty upset. Says, I do not agree with this decision, right? Mm-hmm. Cooper Kupp wanted to finish his career with the Rams.
Yep.
But it's in the best interest of the Rams to trade him. It's in the best interest of Kupp to get cut. That's just kind of interesting to me that maybe they won't agree to a restructure because they say, fine, just cut me, and then I'll go sign with whoever I want.
Yeah.
That's where the game of chess begins between Kupp's camp and the LA Rams.
Well, and I know we understand this, but Kupp will lose out on a bunch of money if the Rams do end up cutting him.
Oh, for sure, but he'll also then be a free agent. I mean, he had $75 million guaranteed in this deal. 3-year, $81 million contract, including a $20 million signing bonus and $75 million guaranteed.
Yeah.
So he's not losing out on all that much if he's still getting 75 of his 80.
Well, and what I'm saying is if he doesn't agree to a restructure and a team is willing to trade for him, he's going to get this money. And I'm saying that's not going to happen. I do not see any scenario where Cooper Kupp plays on this contract with 2 years left. It's just way too much money. It's just way too much. It doesn't fit him and where he's at in his career. So the way that I see it, it's one of two things are going to happen. He is going to agree to restructure to a team that trades for him, much like it was agreed that Russell Wilson was going to get a new extension from the Broncos before he got traded. So he's going to have to agree to restructure his deal with the team that's going to trade for him, and that will be established before the trade. Or he's not going to agree to restructure, and the Rams are going to cut him, and he will be a free agent.
So I would be much more interested in Cooper Kupp as a free agent than I would trading for him, even if he's restructuring, because you still would have to give up an asset in that trade. Not saying it would be a crazy high asset, but it would still be some sort of asset.
Right.
So my level of, again, interest on this is if Kupp's free agent, yeah, I'd make the call. I'd see what we can come to terms money-wise, another weapon for Bo Nix. If they really want to do a trade or he's stubborn about the money or whatever, I know Orlovsky likes him as a fit here in the Broncos. My radar isn't pinging like it is for a Garrett Wilson per se, where I'm very excited and intrigued about that. I mean, Cooper Kupp last year had what? 710 yards, had 737 the year before, 6 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns.
I mean, it's good production when he's out there.
It's decent.
I mean, it's pretty darn good.
Well, they also have Puka Nacua on the other side. The Broncos don't have anywhere close to Puka Nacua.
I agree. But when Cooper Kupp was on the field, and I know part of the conversation is that he has missed some time here for 3 straight years. And this is why we're having this conversation. Because if he doesn't miss time, Will, he's pumping out 1,000-yard seasons. The production that he has put up in the season, this season, last season, you prorate that, it's over 1,000 yards. And it's not like he's...
Barely.
Is it 1,000 yards?
I mean, it was 59 yards a game last year. I'm not going to do victory laps for 59 yards a game. I'm just not.
I'm not doing victory laps. I'm telling you he's been productive when he's been on the field.
But he hadn't been on the field.
It's not like he's played in 3 games. He's played in 12 of the 17.
And the year before, 12 of the 17, and the year before, 9 of the 17.
Correct.
This has been a consistency issue ever since that dream season.
Yep, and this is why we're having this conversation, because he hasn't been on the field enough, and this opens up the door for the Rams to move on from him. I don't think you're moving on from Cooper Kupp if he's healthy and pumping out his 4th straight 1,000-yard season. But he has missed time, and he has been in the 700s and 800s as opposed to a 1,000-yard guy and maybe 8-9 touchdowns as opposed to 5 or 6. So at least for me, it doesn't sound like this is a very appealing option to you.
If he's a free agent, I'd be interested in chatting, but that's pretty much it.
I'm open to it.
Woo!
I really am.
All right. Explain to me why.
I just think he's an absolute stud when he's on the football field.
I think he was a stud for 1 year in 2021.
I think he was at over nearly 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns in 2019. He was 26 yards shy of a 1,000-yard season in 2020. He was almost 2,000 yards in 2021. He's over 800 yards in 2022. Again, he's productive when he's on the field. In the last 3 seasons, he just hasn't been on the field enough, which is why we're having this conversation.
I just can't get excited about numbers a guy put up when none of us knew what COVID was. Like, you didn't know what COVID was. You had never heard of it when he did that in 2019. But that's a season you're going to cite to me as evidence?
Hold on. You cited one season, the 2021 season. I said, hold on a second. He was over 1,100 yards in 2019.
Yeah. Again, when none of us wore a mask or had to stay at home. It was a long time ago.
I understand, but you separated it and acted like it was a one-off when it's not.
I'm just looking at the last 3 years because I think that's much more fair in the NFL.
Perfect.
What have you done for me lately type of league?
Perfect. And in the last 3 years, he has played 2/3 of the game and hauled in 17 touchdowns. This is just in the last 3 years that you want to isolate. And again, the lack of health deserves to be a part of the conversation. There's no doubt. But I also don't want to act like he's played in 3 and 4 games and not 12, 12, and 9. He says he's as healthy as he's ever been. Dan Orlovsky says he's the perfect fit for Sean Payton's offense. When it comes to route running, the dude is an absolute dynamo. Like Marvin Mims can learn a lot from Cooper Kupp's route running. You put him there in the slot to pair with either a Courtland Sutton or a Chris Godwin type. I think this could work. And I'm getting flashbacks to the Adam Thielen conversation. Because once upon a time, Adam Thielen was 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, and he gets to be in his 30s, and it's like, no, he hasn't had, you got to go back 4 seasons for his last 1,000 yards, and he's 32 years old, he's 33 years old, and he puts up a 1,000-yard season. Cooper Kupp is in a different class than someone like Adam Thielen. I'm just getting flashbacks to the arc of the age and some of the, some of the question marks with health and stuff like that. I think this is worth a flyer for the Denver Broncos. He's not a number 1 anymore, but I think he would be a legit number 2. And if he's healthy, I think he's anywhere between 750 yards and 1,100 yards.
But you just answered the question I was going to ask you next, so I appreciate that. Is Cooper Kupp a number 1? No. What do the Broncos need a number 1? Like, I'm much more interested in T. Higgins and Garrett Wilson and maybe even Chris Godwin because they're number 1s. I'm not interested in a number 2. Devon Vailey can be my 2. Marvin Mims can be my 2 or my 3. Like, Cooper Kupp isn't an elite wide receiver. I want them to make one addition at wide receiver this offseason, and I want it to be a top-tier elite number 1 guy. Kupp doesn't check that box.
I understand why you would want that, okay? Garrett Wilson is going to cost a real asset, all right?
Yeah.
And you're going to pay him around $25 million a year.
Well worth it.
T. Higgins is going to be getting paid north of $30 million a year. This, for me, and is Cooper Kupp a bona fide number 1? No, not anymore. Is Courtland Sutton a bona fide NFL number 1? No, not really. He's more of like, he'd be the league's best number 2 if he was a number 2 or in that conversation.
Sure.
With probably a guy like T. Higgins playing next to Jamar Chase or Chris Godwin playing next to Mike Evans. But I think that I'm less worried about, hey, who's a bona fide number 1 like T. Higgins or Garrett Wilson? And it's like, hey, can we do this in aggregate with a player like Courtland Sutton paired with a player like Cooper Kupp to go with these other guys? Like, I'm getting flashbacks to like the Miko conversation. Like, it's not about just paying a superstar. It's, can you get that same production from 3 or 4 different guys? And if you paired Cooper Kupp on the opposite side of Chris Godwin or Courtland Sutton, man, I guess I just believe in Cooper Kupp's talents at this stage in the game more than you do.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to put it. I just think with Bo Nix up and coming, you want to give him an elite number 1 wide receiver. And you look at over the years who's had those, right? Like Patrick Mahomes had that early in his career with Tyreek Hill, okay? Now Mahomes has made everyone else look great, but he and Hill ascended together. I want Nix to have someone to ascend with that's a true number 1, and then when he gets late in his career, I can hodgepodge it, a la what the Chiefs are doing now, a la what the Patriots did all those years with Tom Brady outside of Randy Moss. But again, who did Peyton Manning get to come up with? He got to come up with Marvin Harrison. Like
But there's examples for both. Like, there's examples for both. We've seen teams win Super Bowls without the wide receiver you're looking for. We've seen many Super Bowl champions that don't have that guy and are able to break through.
But my examples were young QBs on the rise. Mahomes had that guy when he was a young QB on the rise. Manning had that guy when he was a young QB on the rise. Even Brady was still pretty much a spring chicken when he got Randy Moss in there.
I don't know about
year
that.
5 or 6.
Yeah,
or
I was
going to
say he had been in the league for a half decade at that point.
Okay, but they didn't win those Super Bowls early on because of Tom. He was a big part. But don't you think the best thing for Bo Nix to become a superstar quarterback is to get him a top-tier wide receiver?
I mean, that would be ideal.
That's why that's my plan.
Like, that would be ideal, but it comes there's context to how you land these guys. And is that the most prudent way to build a football operation, is paying a wide receiver north of $30 million? Typically, that doesn't translate to team wins. So again, like, would I like to have T. Higgins here? Absolutely. Do I want to pay T. Higgins $33 million a year? No, I don't. Would I like to have Garrett Wilson here? Yeah, fantasy football. Let's make the trade happen. But I don't want to give away my first-round pick and then have to turn around and give him a new contract as well that is not going to be north of $30 million. But you end up in those situations paying T. Higgins, paying a Garrett Wilson in the situation where you had the most expensive wide receiver room in the entire league and you're picking in the top 10. So I'm trying to find the intersection of value with the rest of the team building in mind, and that's why I think Cooper Kupp actually checks that box. I think
Well, then what's a number? What's a number? What's a number you'd be comfortable with on Kupp? That's what I'm curious. I think that's the root of this because the $29.8 million cap hit, we both agree is ridiculous.
Non-starter.
So then give me a number where you'd rather have Cooper Kupp for X than T. Higgins for 30.
I'll go Cooper Kupp, a 3-year contract, front-loaded on the first 2 years, 3 years for $40 million with $22 million guaranteed.
Is he going to agree to that?
He might not have. That might be just his market value. And if he's a free agent, it's like, where do you want to go? What do you value here? Because this is probably your last big bite at the financial apple. What do you value? You've already won a Super Bowl. You're Super Bowl MVP. Because if it's about trying to win a Super Bowl and be in a winning situation, it's probably not Denver. Probably not. Maybe it would. It's Sean Payton, Dan Orlovsky saying it's a perfect fit. Maybe it would be the Broncos. But if I'm him and it's about winning and not the money, I'll go to Baltimore. I'll go to Cincinnati. T. Higgins is going out the door. No problem. I'll fill in. I'll be Jamar Chase's number 2. It'd be a situation like that. Buffalo needs a receiver. Yep. So you look at the Ravens. You look at maybe it's the Chiefs.
Ugh. I was just going to say, watch him be a Chief after all this. Doesn't that just feel fitting?
Yes.
Just ring chasing, which I don't blame him. He does already have a ring, but chasing a second. And it'd just be another weapon for Patrick. It'd feel like the Lakers getting Luka, right? The rich just get richer.
And if you see Cooper Kupp running around making plays for Mahomes or making plays,
but everyone makes plays for Mahomes.
Okay, like I don't know. If it's about winning, you probably would not pick the Broncos. Probably. But I don't know what he values here.
Well, and Kupp's statement makes it sound like he wants to play another 4 or 5 years.
Correct.
So if he wants to play another 4 or 5 years, then maybe he would pick the Broncos. Because he does think in the next 4 or 5 years he can get a second ring. And I don't think it's outrageous to say the Broncos can win the Super Bowl in the next 4 or 5 years. Am I predicting it?
Sure.
No. But can they? Absolutely. Absolutely can.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%. I just don't think Cooper Kupp's signing a deal for 4 or 5 years. This is going to be a 2-year, maybe a 3-year contract. And Denver might have to throw in a 3rd year to make a situation like this more appealing.
And again, that would just sort of continue to knock him off my list. I'm just much more intrigued by guys like Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, and Chris Godwin than I am Cooper Kupp.
Sure, fair. I'm all in on Chris Godwin, by the way.
He's your boy. I heard you and Phil going round and round on him a couple times last week.
I think it makes a ton of sense.
I think it would be great. I'm just more of a T guy at the end of the day than Chris Godwin. Probably more of a Garrett Wilson guy, but he's 3 on my list. He's 3. I think my list would go T, Garrett, Godwin, probably Kupp. Because the free agent wide receivers just aren't that. I heard you guys talking about that with James Palmer last night. Like, wide receiver market's going to get interesting because it's not as good in free agency, and B, it's not as good in the draft. Like, wide receivers, people are going to pay a premium for because there's just not a big fluctuation of those guys that are available this offseason.
And how does that affect the Courtland Sutton conversation? Right? Because this is going to be a front and center conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And Courtland Sutton, for I think the 3rd year in a row, well, I know for a fact it's the 3rd year in a row. I just don't know if it's any longer than that. Maybe he was still hurt going back 4 or 5 years. But for at least the 3rd year in a row, Courtland Sutton is once again involved in trade rumors. It was Jarrett Bailey of the Sporting News proposed a trade of Courtland Sutton to the Buffalo Bills. Now, the compensation just doesn't make sense to me because they have it as a 4th-round pick. And it's probably...
Feels low.
It does feel low, but it's probably with the understanding that it's coming with a new contract. Because Sutton is not going to want to play just like he was last year, stomping his feet. Now you got 1 year left on the contract. He is not going to play with 1 year left on the contract. So what do you do if you're Denver? Are you giving him a 3rd contract here in Denver? Do you want to pay Courtland Sutton, $25 million a year going over the next 3 years into his 30s? This is a real conversation here.
Yeah, and based on the way Courtland conducted himself last offseason, he's probably going to do the same thing this coming offseason. He's probably not going to...
And it worked.
It worked.
For him.
But he's probably not going to come to all the voluntary stuff. He probably would come to mandatory OTAs and just do it. Marshawn Lynch, I'm here so I don't get fined. And then he would have that press conference where I still remember what Cecil said. He said, that didn't feel like Courtland Sutton. That felt like an agent, right?
Yes.
We think of Courtland as like fun and go lucky and happy and this good dude, and he just wasn't himself. And then all of a sudden they give him like, what, $1.5 million incentives? And the dude's like he won the lottery. I get it. $1.5 million is a lot of money to everyone listening right now and you and I To an NFL player, it's just not that much. It surprised me that the $1.5 million made him change his attitude that much. I was glad he did.
Yeah.
It was an incredible story week 18 when he hit all the numbers against the Chiefs, got all the money. But if you only have to give him $1.5 million in incentives, I would just do that and kick the can down the road. The problem is entering last year of his deal.
Right, that's
his
the thing.
agent is not going to advise that.
No. And that's why the $1.5 million, maybe that works a year ago.
When he's still got 2 years left.
It's not going to work with 1 year left on the deal.
Then give him $2.5 million.
It's not going to work.
But do you see why I just want to kick the can down the road? Like, as a Broncos fan, I want him to play for the Broncos next year on the last year of his deal. I think that's the best case for Denver because you get Courtland Sutton, but if he falls off, you don't have to overcommit to him and get into a bad contract.
So, yeah, in a perfect and idealistic and utopian world, that's what I would like too. Court, you're under contract. You have 1 year left. Go play your final deal. And if you kill it, you're an unrestricted free agent and Godspeed.
And T. Higgins and Chris Godwin just did that for the record.
Correct. Yep. It's
not totally unheard of.
No, that's true. Considering the way that Sutton operated a year ago, I don't know why there would be some massive course correction year over year. It wouldn't line up with the pattern of he and his agent's behavior.
The only counterpoint I would give you, for the first time in his career, he finally has a quarterback. And maybe that makes all the difference in the world. That last year was just an eruption of frustration because he had played with Case Keenum and Joe Flacco and Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, and we all know the list, Russell Wilson. And Courtland can just smile more this offseason because Bo's a dude.
Yeah.
Bo's going to get me another 1,000-yard year, and next summer I'll get paid, whether by the Broncos or someone else. Maybe.
Do you think that would increase the chances, him having a quarterback here that he believes in him taking a hometown discount and being a lifelong Bronco the way that he has talked about? One of his goals is to get up there on the Ring of Fame and signing a third contract and moving up the list of all-time receiving yards and all this stuff. Do you think that, how much does that weigh? I'm asking you to speculate because we don't know what Courtland values here in this exact intersection because it's going to be his last big deal.
Yeah. And I'm just going on vibes here. He doesn't feel to me like Garrett Bowles, where it just is like he wants nothing more than to be a Bronco the rest of his life. Remember what Garrett did at training camp this year? It was bold. He went up there his first press conference like, I'm open. George, call me. Sean, call me. Like, I'm open. And we're all like, whoa.
Yep.
That was Garrett Bowles, like, actively campaigning for a new deal. He finally got it in what, December?
Yeah.
Took 6 months.
Right.
I don't envision Courtland Sutton going up there and going, I'm open. Call me, George. Call me, Sean.
I agree.
It doesn't feel like he has quite the same personality. I'm not saying he doesn't love the city of Denver. I'm not saying he doesn't love the Broncos.
No. Business. It's a business.
It's more of a business, whereas Bowlesy just wants to live in Denver the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And he couldn't envision wearing another uniform, whereas Courtland probably could envision wearing a different uniform at some point.
This one has potential to once again get frosty between the organization and Sutton.
But I don't think as frosty based on the fact that he's so much happier now.
I think you're being too idealistic. I think he wants his money. He's a pro athlete. He's a receiver.
He ain't tweeting any Will Smith gifts this year when Jerry Jeudy leaves or Russell Wilson. The culture of the Broncos is so much better. Part of the reason it got ugly last year was because the culture was at rock bottom.
So you think Sutton's like, man, the culture here is, so great. I love Denver. I'll play the last year on my deal.
Perhaps.
I don't think it's going down like that, dude.
Because he believes that much in Bo Nix that he knows he's going to have another monster year and get paid strike gold this time next year in 2026.
Oh, I wholeheartedly disagree. I think he and his agent will be business focused, and I think you're being a little bit too idealistic.
Are you calling him a diva?
No, I'm calling him an NFL professional athlete who's got a window of earnings that is super small.
He acted like a diva last year is what I'm getting.
He did kind of act like a diva.
He acted like a diva last year.
Yeah, but he's not going to this year because he loves the culture and he thinks Bo is terrific.
I mean, you'd be naive to not think Courtland Sutton wasn't a lot happier I guarantee if you went and had a latte with Courtland today versus a year ago today, dude's just in a much better mood. Much better mood. Puppies and roses type mood.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I don't think that will reroute him to Denver when finances are this much involved. So we'll see. We'll see.
All right, your prediction is it gets frosty.
Yes.
My prediction is it doesn't.
All right.
We'll see.
But your prediction is he plays the final year of his deal.
That's, again, a little more wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's going to get to the Will Smith level of gifts or the say goodbye on Instagram type deal.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. Okay, we got news.